I've had a lot of people asking me, hey, can you make a video so that we can see what the Stepdown ICU unit looks like on a typical night shift? So I want you guys to follow me, and tonight's night shift, I'm praying is going to be an easy night shift because I have had to work for 3 nights now in a row. So I'm expecting that my patients tonight should still be the same patients. So usually when you walk back to back, they try to make the shift easy for you when you come back by giving you the same patients. You already know what to expect and you already know how to plan your shift appropriately. That does not mean that they cannot still give you different patients. They can, but most at times they would give you the same patients you had the previous night or for the past how many shifts that you've been working. Tonight, I'm hoping it's going to be an amazing shift. I'm praying that there's not going to be any issues. One of my patients last night was kind of sort of critical, and I'm hoping that nothing happens tonight, but we'll see. So follow me, guys. So after getting my shift report, I decided to take a restroom break just to say hi to all my new and old subscribers. So I decided to go back and look through the notes of all my 4 patients and just to familiarize myself with, what was done on the patient. Usually I can tell you that there's going to be so many things that, well, not necessarily so many, but there's going to be certain informations that are vital to the patient that maybe the nurse who gave you report forgot to tell you, which is the reason why I love to always make sure that I go through the notes of my patients before I go ahead to pull out their night medications. Sometimes the doctors are going to round on these patients and they won't necessarily include the nurse. Sometimes they will round on this patient and they won't tell the nurses what they told the patients. Sometimes you as the nurse will walk into the patient's room thinking that you already know everything about this patient, but the patient sometimes will tell you that, hey, the doctor said this, and then you'll be like so confused as to what is going on. So I always like to avoid such confusion by always making sure that I read the notes so that if there's anything that the nurse left out or forgot to tell me, I am one step ahead of the game. So after reading through the notes of all my patients, I now proceed to pulling out my patients' medications. If you watched my previous video, you would know that I am that nurse who pulls out all their patients' medications at once. And I have Ziploc bags which I number for every patient so that I don't get confused. And I just feel like this is me working smart as opposed to working hard. And I wouldn't want to be going back and forth to the Pixie system, so I just will pull all my patients' medications and call it a day. So for this night, I actually had medications for one of my patients who could not swallow their pills whole. So I had to crush the medications, mix in some applesauce, and administer to the patients. If you watched the last video, you know how we do this thing. So after administering my medications to all my 4 patients, I decided to take a quick snack. So I had a banana and an orange. I decided that, hey, this was the perfect time for me to quickly, bite onto something just so that I could start my shift on the right footing. Now, when I came back, I had to round on my patients. Typically, this is something that I love doing because I always like to be in the know of everything that happens to my patients. I feel like maybe I'm just too obsessed about, rounding on my patients, but I feel like this is something that gives me peace of mind, especially if I have patients who are high fall risk. I always want to know that the bed alarm is on. I always want to know that they are, sleeping, checking if they are in pain, or if they need something, if they need water, they want to be clean, they want to use the restroom. I just love making sure that I'm rounding and I'm checking their vital signs, though I could check the vital signs in the nursing station because we have a telemonitor at the nursing station, which is the reason why you keep seeing me turning around when the telemonitor beeps. But it is always nice to always walk and check on my patients, and then I look at the monitor in the room and I know that, hey, the patient's vital signs look stable. or if the patient's vital signs are not stable, I love to walk into the room and make sure that the patient is stable, maybe their oxygen, or maybe their heart rate, or maybe their respiratory rate. So that is something that rounding helps me to give me like a peace of mind, just for my own mental state and for the sake of the patient as well. And also I would tell you that when you keep rounding on the patient, you would tend to pick out certain things that would happen for this patient, and you would tend to know like, hey, at this time when I rounded, I noticed that the heart rate was this, and after 5 minutes when I rounded again on this patient, I noticed that maybe the heart rate had come down to a normal number, or maybe the heart rate had gone higher. And so when you keep rounding like this, it keeps you abreast in knowing that there's certain things that keep changing about a patient and that you should pay more attention to. So after the rounding, that was me, just documenting my 8 o'clock documentation. Remember that I am that nurse that when I'm giving my patient medication, that is when I do go ahead and do my assessment in the patient's room. So even though I was done administering all my patient's medication, I had a patient who had a condition wherein the digestive system was a slow one. So I had to give them one medication every hour in that order, so that the digestive system had some time to be able to digest the medication. So one of my patients called for water, and then another one called for a cough syrup because they were actually coughing and that was increasing their heart rate. So in order to make them calm, I had to give them guafenicin. And so because this night was a very, very busy one, I didn't have the time to document or record everything that happened during this night shift. And so most of the time it's going to look like I was recording only when I was chatting in the nurses station. So yes, that was me quickly taking my lunch break. And then after my lunch break, I love to round on my patient again, because I've been out for 30 minutes, and so I want to make sure that the patients are stable before I sit down to start documenting again. Like I said in my previous video, on the step-down unit, at least in this hospital, we have to document every 4 hours for every patient on this floor. Yes, there's a reason why we have 4 patients, because we do frequent assessments and we do frequent documentations, and things can swing for a patient. At the beginning of the shift, a patient can be all smiley, and before you know it, maybe like 1 hour, 2 hours into your shift, that patient is being taken to the ICU because something suddenly changed for that patient. So I love to round on my patients before I sit down now to come and document my midnight documentation. So it doesn't mean that because I don't document other skills or other things that I do on my shift, you shouldn't look at it like, oh, maybe the step down unit is more so assessments and documentation. No, there's so many several other things and skills that you could be doing. It's either maybe a patient is calling you that they've had an accident, either number 1 or number 2, and you have to clean them up. It's either you're suctioning them, inserting a Foley, starting an IV, administering blood. Like, there's so many other things that I could be doing, but I could not film them just because of HIPAA violations. So whilst I sat at the nursing station, I documented my midnight assessment documentation. I did my 4 o'clock documentation, as well as doing my care and safety. Now in this hospital, we have to document care and safety for every patient every 2 hours. So whilst all documentations were done, it was time for me to pull out my 6 o'clock medications for my patients. Yes, it's already morning and almost time to go home, but my patients, or some of my patients, had morning medications. Most of the times, morning medications would include like levothyroxine, heparin, or maybe an antibiotics, or maybe a diuretics, either Lasix, Bumex, spironolactone, or something like that. But this morning my patient had heparin, the other one had antibiotics, and another one had their thyroid medication. Remember that the thyroid medication is a medication that is mostly advised for patients to take it on an empty stomach. So that is a medication that mostly will be administered very early in the morning. So whilst I had administered all those medications, I decided to come and make sure that I was done with all my care and safety documentation, and to see if there was any outputs maybe urine or poop that I had not yet documented, I decided to go ahead and document it. And oh, one of my patients had a PICC line, and typically when a patient has a PICC line, the nurse is responsible for the morning labs. So it was time for me to draw this patient's morning labs. So I went ahead to pull out all the supplies I was going to need to do this lab draw. Usually I love when everything is at the bedside ready to go. My empty tubes, my flushes, my needle, the tubes for the blood collection, the ziplock, everything is ready to go. Now this is the blood that has already been collected, ready to be sent to the lab. Thank God we have a tube system on this unit, and that makes my work very easy because I just need to send it through the tube system and the lab receives it right away. So at this time, everything that I did for my patients during this night shift, I have to update it in the handoff report, and we get to print it and give it to the oncoming nurse so that everything that has been done for the patient since they got admitted into the hospital is well spelled out, and everybody is on the same level as to what the patient still needs, what has been done on the patient, and what we are anticipating to do maybe sometime in the future for the patient. So I was updating that handoff report sheet, and I was also updating my written handoff sheet because that is what I will be using personally for my own report and for keeping abreast as to everything that has been happening with these patients. So at this time, the oncoming shift nurses were already trooping in, and I knew, and I was so excited that it was time to go home. And we just kept chit-chatting at this time. Usually this is when we just chit-chat amongst ourselves and getting ready and being excited that it was time to go home. So if you've watched my video right up to this point, I know you're loving it. I know you're grasping a lot of information. I know that it's empowering you. It is educating you so much. So why haven't you subscribed? Come on, tell me. Why haven't you subscribed? Girl, please join my bubbly family and let's get to 500 subscribers by the end of next month. And let's take this channel to another level. So excited at this point. It's time for me to go home. Thank you all for staying right up to the end of this video, and from me to you, I want to say thank you, and I'll see you in my next one. Ciao guys.